Before we begin, let us know where you're listening from. After the story, rate it from 1 to 10. Now, let's start. In the year of our Lord 1814, when waistcoats were high, gossip was higher, and the Prince Regent's debts highest of all, there existed a truth universally acknowledged, that royal commands were not suggestions but rather ironclad edicts carved upon the very bedrock of English society. And yet, here we find ourselves at Carlton House, that most ostentatious of royal residencies, where His Majesty King George III, in one of his increasingly rare moments of lucidity, had summoned his eldest son, Augustus Xavier, Prince of Thornfield and heir to the English throne. The king's grey eyes, so like his son's, flashed with an irritation most profound as he paced the richly appointed drawing-room. "Choose any woman but her." The king's voice echoed against the gilded ceiling, causing the footman to wince and the royal portrait of Queen Charlotte to tremble ever so slightly upon the wall. "I forbid it, Augustus. Absolutely forbid it." Now, gentle listeners, allow me to confide that His Majesty's definition of forbidding had never particularly troubled the Prince of Thornfield, who at 29 years had mastered the art of appearing dutiful while doing precisely as he pleased. But we shall return to this royal impasse momentarily. For now, let us direct our attention below stairs, where Katherine Devereux, a chambermaid of exceptional beauty and even more exceptional wit, was engaged in the tedious business of polishing silver. It was a task far beneath her capabilities, though decidedly appropriate to her station. And therein, dear friends, lies our tale. Miss Devereux had not always been in service. Indeed, until the age of 18, she had enjoyed the comforts of a respectable, if modest, home in Derbyshire. Her father, a scholar of some repute but little financial acumen, had left her and her mother with nothing but debts and memories upon his untimely passing. Now, at 23, Katherine had spent 5 years in service, rising from scullery maid to chambermaid through a combination of diligence, intelligence, and, though she would never admit it, a remarkable ability to go unnoticed when advantageous and to be noticed precisely when beneficial. "Polish harder, Devereux," barked Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper whose perpetual grimace suggested she had been weaned on vinegar rather than mother's milk. "His Highness has invited half the ton for the spring musicale, and I'll not have Carlton House disgraced by tarnished silver." "Yes, Mrs. Winters," Katherine replied, her voice melodious despite its deliberately subdued tone. She applied herself with renewed vigor to a particularly obstinate gravy boat, wondering, as she often did, what it might be like to attend such gatherings rather than prepare for them. The spring musicale! How the ton buzzed with anticipation! Lady Jersey had declared it would be the event of the season, while the Duchess of Richmond had sniffed that it would be tolerable if one had absolutely nothing better to attend. Both ladies, naturally, had accepted their invitations with unseemly haste. And why such excitement? Allow me to illuminate. Prince Augustus, that most eligible of royal bachelors, was rumoured to be actively seeking a bride. The king's deteriorating health had prompted the Privy Council to press for a secure succession, and every mother with a marriageable daughter between 16 and 26 had set her cap at the handsome prince. What none knew, save the king, who was most displeased about it, was that Augustus had already lost his heart to a pair of intelligent hazel eyes belonging to someone decidedly not on the approved list of potential royal consorts. Their first encounter had been entirely accidental. The prince, seeking refuge from the suffocating attentions of Lady Millicent Harrington at a previous ball, had ducked into what he believed was an empty antechamber. Instead, he discovered Katherine, arms full of freshly laundered linens, who had paused to examine a particularly fine edition of Shakespeare's sonnets left carelessly upon a side table. "Pardon me," he had said, startled by her presence. Katherine had dropped into a hasty curtsy, nearly upsetting the linens. "Your Highness." "Forgive me, I was just, 'Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments,'" he quoted, noting the open page. "Are you fond of Shakespeare, Miss Devereux, sir?" Katherine Devereux. She had blushed most becomingly. "And yes, though I shouldn't be reading the guest's belongings." Instead of reprimanding her, the prince had smiled. "Neither should I, yet here we both stand, equally guilty. Tell me, Miss Devereux, which sonnet do you favour most?" That brief exchange had led to others, accidental meetings in the library when she dusted, moments in the conservatory when he claimed to be examining exotic plants but was instead watching her arrange flowers, conversations in shadowed corridors that lasted far longer than propriety allowed. And now, 5 months later, the king was in a royal temper, the prince was stubbornly besotted, and Katherine was polishing silver, blissfully unaware that she was the subject of the most heated argument Carlton House had witnessed since the Prince Regent had insisted on installing that ghastly Egyptian-themed dining room that so offended the sensibilities of visiting diplomats. She is intelligent, well-spoken, kind. Prince Augustus was attempting to reason with his father, a futile exercise if ever there was one. She is a servant, the king thundered. A chambermaid. Have you taken complete leave of your senses? The succession cannot depend upon the offspring of a person who polishes other people's silver. The prince's jaw tightened in that particular way that signaled his rarely seen but formidable temper. Her father was a respected scholar before his financial misfortunes. She is educated, well-bred, she is unsuitable. The king collapsed into a chair, his face alarmingly flushed. Augustus, be reasonable. The Habsburgs have 3 eligible princesses. The Russian Grand Duchess Olga is said to be most accomplished. Even Lady Caroline Blackwell would be acceptable, and her grandfather was in trade. I will not marry where I cannot respect or admire, Augustus replied firmly. And I most certainly will not marry where I cannot love. The king's eyes narrowed. Love? Love? What has love to do with royal marriages? Did I love your mother when we wed? Did my father love my mother? We are not characters in some ludicrous novel, boy. Perhaps that is precisely our problem, the prince muttered, though wisely not loudly enough for his father to hear. Meanwhile, in another part of the palace, the preparations for the musicale continued at a frantic pace. Katherine had progressed from polishing silver to arranging hothouse flowers in crystal vases, a promotion of sorts, though her arms ached abominably from the earlier task. Have you heard, whispered Eliza, another chambermaid who possessed an uncanny ability to gather intelligence from every corner of the household. The king and the prince had a terrible row this morning. About a woman. Katherine nearly dropped a particularly expensive Venetian vase. What woman? Nobody knows. But Jenkins, you know, the king's valet, says His Majesty was shouting that the prince could choose any woman but her. Isn't it thrilling? A forbidden love. Eliza sighed romantically. Perhaps she's married to someone else. Or French. Oh, imagine if she were French. How delightfully scandalous that would be, Katherine replied dryly, though her heart gave a peculiar lurch. She had no illusions about her conversations with the prince, they were merely the indulgence of a bored royal who found her literacy a novelty. Nothing more. Certainly nothing that would provoke a royal quarrel. The night of the musicale arrived with all the subtlety of a cavalry charge. Carlton House blazed with candlelight, its halls filled with the cream of society. Ladies in diaphanous gowns of palest silk drifted through rooms like exotic blooms, while gentlemen in impeccable evening attire congregated in strategic positions to better observe the feminine display. The Honourable Miss Pettigrew performed a pianoforte piece so technically perfect and emotionally vacant that several elderly gentlemen were observed nodding off behind their programmes. Lady Millicent Harrington sang an Italian aria with more enthusiasm than skill, causing one musical critic to mutter that the cats in Naples must be particularly jealous of her range. Throughout it all, Prince Augustus appeared distracted, his gaze frequently drifting toward the servants' entrance where Katherine and other staff members moved efficiently, ensuring glasses remained filled and plates replenished. His Highness seems quite taken with the refreshments this evening, observed the sharp-eyed Countess of Riven to the Marchioness of Exeter. He has scarcely glanced at any of the eligible young ladies. Perhaps he finds their company less stimulating than champagne, the Marchioness replied with a knowing smile. Though my Sophia played and sang most beautifully, did she not? The Countess, whose own daughter had performed a French folk song with all the grace of a wounded pheasant, merely sniffed. As the evening progressed, society's mothers grew increasingly concerned by the prince's apparent lack of interest in their carefully displayed daughters. He danced the obligatory quadrille with Lady Caroline Blackwell, whose grandfather, despite the king's dismissive remark, had actually been quite respected in shipping circles, exchanged pleasantries with the Russian Grand Duchess Olga, whose English was limited to charming, delightful, and curiously, tax exemption, and then disappeared altogether. Had any of the guests ventured into the palace's western conservatory, they would have discovered His Highness engaged in most improper conversation with a chambermaid whose cheeks were flushed with more than just the warmth of the glass-enclosed garden. "You must stop this," Katherine was saying, though she made no move to increase the distance between them. "People will talk." "Let them," replied the prince with the careless confidence of a man who had never truly suffered consequences. "I care not." "That is because you are not the one who would be dismissed without references," she countered. "Your Highness, these conversations, they cannot continue." "Augustus," he corrected. "When we are alone, I wish to hear my name on your lips, not my title." "That is precisely the sort of statement that would see me not only dismissed but possibly imprisoned for impertinence," Katherine said, though a reluctant smile tugged at her mouth. The prince moved closer, close enough that the subtle scent of lavender water that Katherine used to freshen her clothing teased his senses. "I spoke with my father today." "Did you?" Her voice was carefully neutral, though her pulse quickened traitorously. "Yes." "About you." The color drained from Katherine's face. "Me?" "But why would—" "Because I intend to marry you, Katherine Devereux, and while I do not require my father's permission, I had hoped for his blessing." The conservatory seemed suddenly airless. Katherine's hand flew to her throat, where her pulse fluttered like a trapped bird. "Marry?" "Your Highness, Augustus, you cannot be serious." "I am a chambermaid." "You are a man who recognizes quality when he sees it," he finished for her. "A man who values intelligence and kindness above birth and connections. A man who, quite frankly, is tired of simpering debutantes who can speak of nothing but the weather and the latest fashions." "The ton would never accept it," Katherine whispered, though something dangerous like hope was beginning to bloom in her chest. "The king would never permit it." "The king," Augustus said with a wry smile, "specifically commanded me to choose any woman but you. Which, if you think about it, is tacit acknowledgement that you are indeed a woman I might choose." Katherine couldn't help but laugh at this tortured logic. "That is the most absurd interpretation of a royal command I have ever heard." "Perhaps. But I am remarkably stubborn when I set my mind to something." His gaze softened as he took her hand in his. "Tell me truly, Katherine, do you feel nothing for me? If you say no, I will trouble you no further." Dear listeners, I assure you that Katherine Devereux was no simpering miss prone to fainting at the first declaration of affection. She was practical, intelligent, and had survived 5 years in service by keeping her wits about her. Yet in this moment, faced with the earnest gaze of a prince who somehow saw beyond her apron to the woman beneath, her practical nature waged a fierce battle with her heart. "I?" she began, then stopped. Started again. "It would be easier if I felt nothing." "But," he prompted gently. "But I am not in the habit of lying, even when the truth is inconvenient." She met his gaze squarely. "I have developed feelings that are most inappropriate for someone in my position." The prince's smile was like sunrise breaking over the horizon. "Then we are agreed. The situation is impossible, impractical, and bound to create the scandal of the century." "That is not particularly reassuring," Katherine noted dryly. "It wasn't meant to be." He raised her hand to his lips. "It was merely an acknowledgement of the facts before I proceed to ignore them entirely." Their moment of understanding was abruptly shattered by the sound of the conservatory door opening. Katherine snatched her hand away, but not quickly enough to escape the notice of the Dowager Duchess of Halford, whose eyebrows shot up so dramatically they nearly disappeared into her elaborate turban. "Your Highness," the Duchess said, her voice dripping with insinuation. "I had no idea you were botanizing this evening." "Indeed, Your Grace," the prince replied smoothly. "I find the study of the native species most illuminating." The Duchess's gaze swept over Katherine, who had dropped into a deep curtsy. "Native species? How educational. Will you be rejoining the music hall? Lady Millicent has prepared a second aria that she is most eager to perform." "Another aria?" How could I possibly resist? His tone suggested he would rather submit to tooth extraction without laudanum. I shall return directly. The Duchess lingered, clearly expecting Katherine to depart first. With another curtsy and eyes downcast, Katherine murmured, "By your leave, your Highness, your Grace," and fled the conservatory with as much dignity as she could muster. The damage, however, was done. By midnight, whispers of the prince's tête-à-tête with a servant had circulated through the party like influenza in a boarding school. By dawn, the story had evolved to include passionate embraces and plans for elopement. By luncheon the following day, half of London society believed the prince had secretly married the girl in a gypsy ceremony, while the other half was convinced she was with child. The reality, of course, was far less sensational but infinitely more complex. Katherine found herself summoned to Mrs. Winter's office the morning after the musicale, where the housekeeper regarded her with a mixture of suspicion and calculation. "You've caused quite a stir, Devereux," Mrs. Winters said, folding her hands on her desk. "The Dowager Duchess of Halford has personally complained about your familiarity with His Highness." Katherine kept her expression neutral. "I assure you, Mrs. Winters, I was simply answering the prince's questions about the conservatory plants. He expressed interest in the new orchids from Brazil." "Did he indeed?" The housekeeper's tone suggested she found this explanation as plausible as the prince developing a sudden interest in darning socks. "Well, regardless of your horticultural discussions, I cannot have servants who attract this kind of attention. You are dismissed." Despite having anticipated this outcome, the word still struck Katherine like a physical blow. "Without references." Mrs. Winters hesitated, then sighed. "You've been a good worker, Devereux. I'll provide a character reference for your punctuality and skills, but I'll not be able to recommend you for any household where you might encounter members of the ton. Perhaps a position in the country would be best." It was both better and worse than Katherine had feared. With a reference, she would not starve, but her options were now severely limited. She would need to leave London, perhaps return to Derbyshire where her mother now lived as a companion to an elderly widow. "I understand," Katherine said quietly. "When must I leave?" "Today." "Your wages through the month." Mrs. Winters pushed a small envelope across the desk. "I've arranged for a hackney to take you to the coaching inn at noon." 3 hours. She had 3 hours to pack 5 years of her life into one small trunk and leave behind, what? Dreams she had never dared to acknowledge? Feelings for a man so far above her station that the very idea of them was laughable. As she folded her modest belongings, Katherine reflected on the absurdity of her situation. Certainly, the prince had spoken of marriage, but men, especially powerful men, often said things in private moments that they had no intention of honoring in the cold light of day. She had no illusions that he would actually defy his father, the court, and centuries of tradition for a chambermaid, no matter how educated or well-spoken. Meanwhile, in another wing of the palace, Prince Augustus was engaged in a heated discussion with his closest friend and advisor, Lord Ethan Montague. "You cannot be serious," Montague said, pacing the prince's study. "A chambermaid? Augustus, think of your position, your responsibilities." "I have thought of nothing else for months," the prince replied, his expression resolute. "I am 29 years old, Ethan. I have fulfilled every duty, attended every tedious function, listened to every insipid debutante play the pianoforte badly. I have earned the right to choose my own bride. The king will never permit it." "The king," Augustus said with a pointed look, "is not well. The doctors say his lucidity will continue to deteriorate. The Regency is already in effect for all practical purposes. I need not his permission, merely his eventual acceptance." Montague collapsed into a chair. "You are determined to create the greatest scandal since Henry VIII broke with Rome." "I prefer to think of it as a romantic gesture that will capture the imagination of the people," the prince countered. "The commoners will love the notion of one of their own elevated to royalty. And the aristocracy will be apoplectic. They'll adjust. They always do when they have no choice." Augustus glanced at the clock on the mantel. "Now, I need you to perform a service for me, old friend." Miss Devereux is being dismissed as we speak. I need you to ensure she does not leave London. And how, precisely, am I to accomplish that? Montague asked, already looking resigned to his fate as accessory to royal madness. Creativity, Ethan. I have absolute faith in your creativity. As noon approached, Katherine stood in the servants' entrance of Carlton House, her small trunk at her feet. She had said her goodbyes to the few friends she had made among the staff, endured the pitying glances of some and the envious speculation of others. Now there was nothing left but to depart with what dignity she could muster. The promised hackney pulled up, and the driver, a burly man with a weathered face, hopped down to load her trunk. Miss Devereux, he asked, touching his cap. Yes. Right then. The coaching in it is. The journey through London's busy streets gave Katherine time to consider her options. Her mother had written just last month that the widow she served was declining rapidly. Perhaps there would be a position in the same household. It wouldn't be much of a life, but it would be respectable and secure, two qualities that seemed increasingly valuable in her current circumstances. Her melancholy reflections were interrupted when the hackney took an unexpected turn away from the coaching inn. "Excuse me," she called to the driver. "I believe you've missed the turning." "Change of plans, miss," the man replied cheerfully. "Got instructions to take you to Grosvenor Square instead." "Grosvenor Square? But I have no business there." "Please, turn back at once." "Can't do that, miss. Paid very well to deliver you to number 17, and that's what I mean to do." Katherine felt a flash of alarm. "Who gave you these instructions?" "Gentleman at Carlton House. Very insistent, he was. Said it was a matter of some importance." Before Katherine could demand more information, the carriage came to a stop before an imposing townhouse. The door opened immediately, and a liveried footman approached. "Miss Devereux? Lord Montague is expecting you." "Lord Montague? The Prince's closest friend?" Katherine's alarm deepened. What game was being played here? With few options available, she allowed herself to be escorted into an elegantly appointed drawing-room where Lord Montague stood waiting, looking simultaneously uncomfortable and amused. "Miss Devereux, thank you for coming." He gestured to a chair. "Please, be seated. I apologize for the unorthodox invitation." "Invitation?" "I was effectively kidnapped, my lord." Katherine remained standing, her posture rigid. "I demand an explanation. Direct and forthright." "I can see why he's enamored," Montague murmured. "Very well. I am acting on behalf of Prince Augustus, who was most distressed to learn of your dismissal from Carlton House." Katherine's heart performed a treacherous leap before she sternly reminded it of reality. "That is unfortunate but hardly surprising. I have been provided with a reference and was on my way to secure new employment when your driver diverted my journey." "Yes, about that new employment." Montague cleared his throat. "The Prince has a proposition for you." "A proposition?" Katherine's voice cooled to Arctic temperatures. "I see." Lord Montague's eyes widened as he grasped her implication. "Good God, no. Nothing of that nature. Augustus would have my head on a pike. No, he wishes to offer you a position as lady's companion to his great-aunt, the Princess Royal Sophia." Of all the possibilities Katherine had imagined, this was not among them. "Lady's companion? To a princess? My lord, that is absurd. I am a chambermaid." "You are the daughter of a scholar who has fallen on hard times," Montague corrected. "A gentlewoman by birth if not by current circumstance. The Princess Royal is elderly, partially blind, and in need of someone to read to her, manage her correspondence, and provide intelligent conversation. Augustus believes you would suit admirably." Katherine sank into the offered chair, her legs suddenly unsteady. "This is most unexpected. The position comes with apartments in Kensington Palace, a generous stipend, and the understanding that you would be free to receive visitors." Montague's emphasis on the last word was subtle but unmistakable. "The princess is aware of her great-nephew's interest and has agreed to the arrangement." Does the king know of this plan? Katherine asked shrewdly. The king, Montague replied with a diplomatic smile, is currently preoccupied with matters of state and has delegated household appointments to the Prince Regent. In other words, they were circumventing the king entirely. It was clever, Katherine had to admit. As companion to the Princess Royal, she would occupy a position of respectability within the royal household, neither servant nor equal, but something in between. It would allow the prince to continue their acquaintance under the guise of visiting his great-aunt. And if I refuse? Then the hackney driver will take you wherever you wish to go, with my apologies for the inconvenience. Montague's expression softened slightly. He cares for you, Miss Devereux. Deeply. I have known Augustus since we were boys at Eton, and I have never seen him so determined. Katherine studied Lord Montague's face, searching for signs of deception or mockery. Finding none, she asked the question that had been burning in her mind since the conservatory. Does he truly believe we could have a future? A prince and a former chambermaid. Augustus has always possessed a remarkable ability to reshape reality to suit his preferences, Montague replied dryly. In this case, however, I believe his conviction goes beyond mere stubbornness. He intends to marry you, Miss Devereux, and while the path will not be easy, I would not bet against his determination. The world seemed to tilt slightly on its axis. Marriage. Not a dalliance, not an affair, but marriage. It was both terrifying and exhilarating, like standing at the edge of a cliff with the wind at her back. May I have some time to consider? She asked. Of course. Though I should mention that the Princess Royal is expecting you for tea at 4 o'clock. Montague glanced at the clock. Which gives you precisely 2 hours to decide whether you wish to accept a position that will elevate you from servant to gentlewoman companion, place you in proximity to a prince who wishes to marry you, and potentially lead to you becoming the future Queen of England. He paused. No pressure, of course. Despite herself, Katherine laughed. When you present it that way, my lord, how could any sensible woman refuse? So you accept? Katherine took a deep breath, considering the crossroads before her. Return to Derbyshire and a life of quiet, respectable service? Or step into an uncertain future that offered both unprecedented opportunity and the potential for heartbreak on a royal scale? I accept, she said, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. Though I reserve the right to depart if the situation becomes untenable. A prudent condition, Montague agreed. Now, shall we prepare you to meet the Princess Royal? She can be rather formidable, but I assure you her bark is worse than her bite. Usually. The introduction to Princess Sophia proved both more terrifying and more successful than Katherine could have anticipated. The elderly royal, whose failing eyesight had done nothing to dim her sharp intellect, subjected Katherine to a thorough interrogation about her education, family background, and literary preferences. So you're the girl who's turned my great-nephew's head, the Princess Royal observed, peering at Katherine through a jewelled lorgnette. Pretty enough, I suppose, though not what I'd call a classical beauty. But beauty fades. What have you between your ears, girl? That's what matters. I believe that is for your Royal Highness to determine, Katherine replied carefully. A cackle of laughter escaped the old woman. Diplomatic. Good. You'll need that skill if you're to navigate court life. Now, read to me from this volume of Milton. And none of that simpering, breathless style that makes me want to toss my tea at the reader. By the end of the afternoon, Katherine had been installed in a surprisingly comfortable set of rooms adjacent to the Princess Royal's apartments, provided with a wardrobe allowance that made her light-headed, and given a stack of correspondence to organize before dinner. My great-nephew will call tomorrow, Princess Sophia informed her as Katherine prepared to withdraw. I expect you to remember that you are my companion first and foremost. Any personal matters must be conducted with the utmost discretion. Am I understood? Perfectly, Your Royal Highness. The princess's roomy eyes twinkled with unexpected mischief. Good. Now, one last thing, George may be king, but I changed his nappies when he was a squalling infant. If he gives you trouble, you come to me. With that astonishing statement, Katherine was dismissed to her new quarters, where she sat on the edge of a bed finer than any she had ever slept in and wondered if perhaps she had fallen asleep in the servants' quarters and was dreaming this entire improbable scenario. News of Catherine's appointment spread through society with predictable results. The Ton buzzed with speculation about the servant girl who had so mysteriously been elevated to companion to the Princess Royal. Theories ranged from the relatively benign, she had saved the princess from choking on a fish bone, to the outlandish, she was the illegitimate daughter of the Prince Regent himself, making any romance with Prince Augustus scandalously incestuous. The truth, that Prince Augustus had orchestrated the appointment because he was genuinely in love with her, was considered too far-fetched to be credible. A royal prince, besotted with a chambermaid. Lady Jersey scoffed at a dinner party. Preposterous. Men of his station might dally with such women, but love? Marriage? Impossible. And yet, observed the more perceptive Countess of Riven, he has attended every event where Miss Devereux accompanies the Princess Royal, danced with her at Lord and Lady Hertford's ball last week, and was seen walking with her in Kensington Gardens on Tuesday. Walking? In public. Lady Jersey's eyebrows ascended to heights previously unknown to anatomical science. With the Princess Royal's companion and lady-in-waiting as chaperones, the Countess clarified. All perfectly proper. But the intent, that was clear to anyone with eyes to see. The king, when informed of these developments, suffered a relapse that confined him to his chambers for a fortnight. Upon his recovery, he summoned his son for another confrontation. You deliberately defied me, the king accused, his voice weaker than before but no less imperious. I forbade you to pursue this chambermaid, and instead, you installed her at court. Former chambermaid, Augustus corrected mildly. Current companion to your sister, who finds her intelligent, capable, and a vast improvement over her previous reader, who apparently had a voice like a cat being slowly strangled. Do not attempt to divert me with Sophia's peculiar opinions, the king snapped. You mean to marry this girl, don't you? Augustus met his father's gaze steadily. I do. It cannot be permitted. The succession will be secured by our children, who will be just as royal as if their mother had been a Habsburg with a chin you could use to open letters. The king sputtered incoherently for several moments before finding his voice again. The aristocracy will never accept her. The foreign courts will be scandalized. It will undermine the very foundation of the monarchy. The aristocracy, Augustus said with the patience of a man who had rehearsed this argument extensively, accepted Queen Charlotte, who came from a minor German duchy. They will accept Catherine. As for foreign courts, they are too preoccupied with Napoleon's defeat and the Congress of Vienna to concern themselves with my marital choice. And the monarchy has survived far worse scandals than a prince marrying for love. Love! The king practically spat the word. What foolishness has infected you? Royal marriages are alliances, boy, not romantic entanglements from those ridiculous novels your mother reads. Augustus moved to the window, gazing out at the gardens where Catherine often walked with the Princess Royal. Father, consider this, would England not benefit from a queen who understands the common people? Who has lived among them, worked as they do, known their struggles firsthand? In these times of unrest, might not such a queen help bridge the growing divide between the crown and its subjects? It was a masterful appeal, touching as it did on the king's genuine concern for his realm's stability following the Napoleonic Wars. George III frowned thoughtfully, his anger momentarily diverted by political calculation. She would need to be properly prepared, he muttered. Educated in protocol, diplomatic relations, court etiquette. Augustus suppressed a triumphant smile, recognizing the first hint of capitulation. Of course. Catherine is an exceptionally quick study. And the Princess Royal has already begun her instruction in royal protocols. The king harumphed. Sophia always was unnaturally fond of you. Spoiled you abominably as a child. He drummed his fingers on the arm of his chair. I want to meet this girl. Properly. Not as a servant, but as your intended. You wish to meet her? Augustus clarified, hardly daring to believe a concession. Did I stutter? Yes, I wish to meet the woman who has apparently bewitched my son to the point of jeopardizing centuries of royal tradition. Arrange it. And so it was that Katherine Devereux, just 6 months after polishing silver in Carlton House, found herself preparing to be formally presented to the King of England, not as a servant, but as a prospective bride for his son. I think I might be ill, she confessed to Princess Sophia as her lady's maid, for she had a bewildering development, arranged her hair for the audience. Nonsense, the Princess Royal replied briskly. George's bark is worse than his bite, particularly these days. His mind wanders. If he becomes difficult, simply mention the agricultural improvements at Windsor. He'll lecture for an hour and forget why he was angry. Katherine smiled weakly. I shall keep that in mind, Your Highness. And remember, you are not a chambermaid appearing before your sovereign. You are a gentlewoman being introduced to your future father-in-law. Conduct yourself accordingly. The audience chamber seemed to stretch for miles as Katherine walked its length, conscious of every eye upon her. She wore a gown of pale blue silk, simple by court standards but of excellent quality, and carried herself with the dignified posture that the Princess Royal had drilled into her over countless hours. Augustus waited beside his father's chair, his encouraging smile providing the courage she desperately needed. The king, looking frailer than she remembered from her days at Carlton House, regarded her with undisguised curiosity. Miss Devereux, he said after she had completed her curtsy. So you are the young woman who has captured my son's heart and disrupted my court. Katherine met his gaze steadily. I believe your Majesty overestimates my influence. The disruption, I fear, is more the result of speculation than any action on my part. The king's eyebrows rose slightly at her composed response. Well spoken. Sophia tells me you read Milton to her without putting her to sleep. That alone would qualify you as exceptional. Her Royal Highness is most generous in her assessment, Katherine replied. She is never generous in her assessments, the king corrected with a surprising chuckle. Sophia has reduced ambassadors to tears with her critiques. He leaned forward, studying Katherine more intently. Tell me, Miss Devereux, what do you think qualifies you to be a prince's wife? A future queen. Augustus made a small sound of protest, but Katherine gave him a brief look that silenced him. Nothing, Your Majesty, she answered honestly. I possess neither royal blood nor aristocratic connections. I have no fortune, no influential family, no diplomatic training. By any traditional measure, I am supremely unqualified for the role. The king settled back, his expression unreadable. Yet my son believes otherwise. His Highness sees qualities in me that I can only hope to live up to, Katherine said. What I can offer is this, a perspective different from those who have always known privilege. An understanding of your subjects' lives that comes from having lived among them. A commitment to learning what I do not know. And a profound love for your son that would compel me to spend every day striving to be worthy of the position he wishes me to hold. A long silence followed her words. The king's gaze shifted to his son. You chose well, he said finally. She neither grovels nor pretends to be what she is not. He turned back to Katherine. I maintain significant reservations, Miss Devereux. The path you and my son wish to walk will not be easy. There will be those who never accept you, who will scrutinize your every word and action for evidence of your common origins. I am aware, Your Majesty. However, the king continued, I find myself not entirely opposed to the match. He held up a hand to forestall Augustus's exclamation of joy. Provided certain conditions are met. Name them, the prince said eagerly. First, a proper period of preparation, 1 year, during which Miss Devereux will receive instruction in all aspects of royal duty. Second, her background must be irreframed. The daughter of a scholar is acceptable, a chambermaid is not. The official narrative will emphasize her father's academic achievements and minimize her period in service. Third, here the king fixed Katherine with a penetrating stare, you must prove to me, to the court, and to the people that you are more than my son's infatuation. You must demonstrate the dignity, intelligence, and character befitting a royal consort. Katherine curtsied again. I accept your Majesty's conditions and welcome the opportunity to prove myself worthy of your son and your throne." The king nodded, then waved a dismissive hand. "You may go. I wish to speak with my son privately." Outside the audience chamber, Katherine sagged against a wall, her composure finally cracking. It wasn't a resounding endorsement, but neither was it the outright rejection she had feared. The king had offered a path forward, difficult, demanding, but possible. Meanwhile, within the chamber, the king fixed his son with a weary gaze. "She is remarkable," he admitted. "But this will not be easy, Augustus. There will be resistance from all quarters." "I know." The prince's voice was quiet but determined. "She is worth it." The king sighed heavily. "Your mother said something similar about me, once upon a time." "He is worth it," she told her father when he objected to our match. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Charlotte was right, though it took me years to realize it. Perhaps you are wiser than I was." Augustus knelt beside his father's chair, taking the old man's hand in his own. "Thank you, father." "Don't thank me yet," the king warned. "I've merely postponed my opposition, not abandoned it." "If she fails to meet my conditions, she won't fail," Augustus interrupted confidently. "You'll see." The year that followed tested both Catherine's resolve and Augustus's patience. Under the Princess Royal's exacting tutelage, Katherine studied royal protocol, diplomatic history, and the complex web of European alliances. She learned to receive foreign dignitaries, manage a royal household, and navigate the treacherous waters of court politics. Throughout it all, Augustus remained steadfast in his devotion, their relationship deepening beyond the initial attraction to a partnership of minds and hearts. They read together, debated politics, and planned improvements to the royal estates that would benefit the tenants and workers. Society gradually adjusted to Catherine's presence at court functions, though acceptance came more readily from some quarters than others. Lady Jersey maintained a frosty disdain, while the Countess of Riven became an unexpected ally, taking it upon herself to introduce Katherine to the more open-minded members of the ton. "You must not take Lady Jersey's snubs to heart," the Countess advised during a musicale at Devonshire House. She objected similarly when the Duke of Grafton married his mistress, and now she takes tea with the Duchess twice monthly. "The aristocracy's ability to adapt never ceases to amaze me," Katherine replied with a smile. "It is our most useful trait," the Countess agreed. "That, and our capacity for selective memory. In a decade, half the ton will claim they always supported your match and the other half will pretend to have been intimate friends with your family for generations." As the probationary year drew to a close, the king, whose health had stabilized somewhat under new treatments, summoned Katherine for a final assessment. This time, Augustus was not present. "You have surprised me, Miss Devereux," the king admitted, his voice stronger than it had been during their first meeting. "My sister informs me that you have mastered every challenge set before you. The Austrian ambassador praised your conversation on Viennese music. Even Lady Jersey was heard to remark that you comport yourself tolerably well for someone of your background, high praise indeed from that quarter." "I have tried to be worthy of your Majesty's confidence," Katherine replied. "Yes, well." The king shifted uncomfortably. "It appears I may have been hasty in my initial judgment. You have demonstrated qualities that would serve the crown well. Intelligence, dignity, adaptability, and a certain, refreshing directness that the court could benefit from." Katherine hardly dared breathe, afraid to disrupt this unexpected flow of approval. "My son remains determined to marry you," the king continued. "And I find I no longer have the heart, or, frankly, the grounds, to oppose him. Therefore, you have my blessing, Miss Devereux. Or should I say, the future Princess of Thornfield." Joy surged through Katherine, so powerful she feared her knees might buckle. "Your Majesty honors me beyond words." "Indeed I do," the king agreed with a hint of his old asperity. "See that you remember it when dealing with my more difficult subjects. Now go, find Augustus. I believe he is wearing a path in the carpet outside my antechamber." She found the prince exactly where his father had predicted, pacing anxiously. His face, when he saw her, transformed with hope. "He has given his blessing," Katherine said, her voice trembling slightly. "We are to be married." Augustus swept her into his arms, propriety forgotten in the joy of the moment. "Did I not tell you? Did I not promise that he would see in you what I see?" "You did," she acknowledged, laughing through tears of happiness. "Though I confess, I doubted many times." "Never doubt again," he murmured, cupping her face in his hands. "Not my love, not your worth, not our future together." Their wedding, held 6 months later at St. George's Chapel, Windsor, was attended by the entirety of the ton, some out of genuine goodwill, others from sheer curiosity, and a significant number because refusing a royal invitation was simply not done, no matter how unconventional the match. Lady Jersey was overheard remarking that the bride looked almost regal, which, translated from the particular dialect of aristocratic backhanded compliments, was tantamount to effusive praise. The Countess of Riven wept openly during the vows, later claiming it was due to her sensitive eyes and the chapel's abundant candles, fooling absolutely no one. The king, having rallied for the occasion, presented Katherine with a tiara that had belonged to his mother, a gesture whose significance was lost on no one present. The Princess Royal, resplendent in purple silk and more diamonds than seemed physically possible to wear without spinal damage, declared it the only royal wedding I've attended that didn't bore me to tears. As Prince Augustus and his new princess processed from the chapel to the thunderous applause of the gathered crowds, the king turned to the Princess Royal with a bemused expression. "He really did it," George III murmured. "Defied me, defied tradition, and married his chambermaid." "Former chambermaid," Sophia corrected primly. "Current Princess of Thornfield and future Queen of England. And I believe your exact words were choose any woman but her, which, as Augustus pointed out, was practically an invitation to do precisely the opposite." The king's lips twitched in reluctant amusement. "That boy always did take my commands as suggestions." "A trait he inherited from you, brother dear," the Princess Royal observed dryly. "Now come, let us join the celebration. I predict this marriage will produce heirs with both the wisdom to rule and the common sense to understand their subjects, a rare combination in our family, you must admit. And so, dear listeners, we conclude our tale of how Prince Augustus defied his father's command to choose any woman but her and followed his heart to find happiness with the most unlikely of brides. Their union would indeed prove to be everything the Princess Royal predicted, a marriage of true minds that brought fresh perspective to an ancient institution and produced heirs who balance royal dignity with genuine understanding of the people they would one day rule. For in the end, it was not Katherine's birth that qualified her to be a princess, but the very qualities that had drawn Augustus to her in the first place, her intelligence, her character, and her capacity for growth. Sometimes, it seems, the perfect match can be found in the most unexpected places, even polishing silver in the royal household. Now, do tell us where you're listening from, and don't forget to rate our story from 1 to 10. Until next time, this is your faithful chronicler of the ton's most scandalous and romantic tales, bidding you adieu.